Hi there, and welcome to the Side Quest, the Authors and Dragons In Between Quest podcast, where we take a break from the high stakes action and adventure for a little smooth talking geek talk. I guess by the time you listen to this, Avengers Endgame will have already come out, and I assume all the heroes are dead. And the Game of Thrones will be winding up to its conclusion. So we're going to talk a little bit about these huge tentpole geek franchises and what might rise up in their absence. But before we get into that, who do we have with us today? We have myself, Steve Wetherill, we have Robert Bevan, we have Drew Hayes, and we have Rick Waltieri. Hello.
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 And I feel you're remiss because you said Avengers Endgame and everybody's dead, when you really should have said, and Game of Thrones is ending, and almost certainly everybody's dead.
Well, maybe there'll just be like some crossover event we didn't see coming.
That would be a reason not to spoil Endgame. I've seen that hashtag moving, and by God, if Daenerys is about to bust in and fight Thanos, that would I'd like to not to be spoiled.
Well, it's too late. We've just spoiled it for ourselves.
We're too clever for our own good.
Imagine Cersei with the Infinity Gauntlet.
Oh God, half. Oh, we're not stopping at half.
She would be like, no, I'm lining you all up and doing it one at a time, motherfuckers.
Yeah, it'd just be her and her brother left.
It wouldn't even
restart the population.
It would be her and her brother's dick left. I don't think she needs the rest of them.
Oh dear, that's horrifying. Though this isn't the end of the MCU, obviously, it's making far too much money for it to ever end. But I do think it's definitely being billed as kind of the end of phase one, probably the end of the chapter. It wouldn't surprise me if we lost a few of the old faithful characters. If, Iron Man, as we know him, and Captain America, as we know him, happened to kick the bucket, I wouldn't be too surprised.
Well, the meta of knowing that their contracts are up means we're almost certain Cap's out, right?
Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he had an earth-shaking comic book death that was very good for sales, so yeah. Also, it makes sense. The martyrdom of his character is kind of the point of his character, whereas the Iron Man suit can just be, again, as we've seen in the comics, just kind of passed on.
Well, technically, there's been about at least a dozen different Captain Americas over the years too.
MCU Cap is on his own specific arc, and it's clearly he shouldn't be here. He should have died, and now he's just kind of a man out of time.
And we're pretty sure that it's that Bucky is not going to take over. And again, spoilers if you haven't watched the news, but the new Disney streaming service has already announced a Winter Soldier Falcon show.
But I wonder, that could be a misdirect. They will fuck with their trailers. It's not impossible for them to fuck with our own knowledge of the meta against us. I wouldn't put that on any other company, but given what we saw them do with Infinity War and the way we saw them keep so much shit under wraps and even making fake footage for the trailers and whole fake scenes, I don't know that I believe it necessarily, but it wouldn't shock me.
Yeah, the only reason I might not believe that is because when Marvel does it, it's specifically that Marvel arm. But this news is coming from Disney itself, and they don't strike me as the type to have that kind of sense of humor.
I think less sense of humor, more just powerful marketing. Because if they could use that to pull a twist in the movie that people were deeply hit by, it would be a mark in their favor. It'd be haha, see?
I mean, that is their motto, isn't it? Disney, the most powerfully humorless place on earth.
Disney, we are Thanos given form.
We own you. It's safe to talk about this. The Endgame, by the time this releases, I think has already happened. We already know if Captain America makes sweet love to Tony Stark, or if Game of Thrones dies with everybody fucking their sister, which I just assume is the way it's going. It'll turn out that they're all related. It'll be awkward, but then they'll have sex anyway.
Yeah, that really has never stopped anyone on Game of Thrones.
Yeah, that's my prediction for Game of Thrones. Everybody finds out they're related. It's a bit of foot shuffling going on. And then orgy.
Yeah, my prediction's already out the window. I was rooting for Littlefinger to take the throne.
No, they wrote him out quite unceremoniously, I thought, in season 7. Yeah. I got the real impression in season 7 they just like, it's about time we started wrapping this up. Even I'm having trouble tracking this now.
I don't know.
I tidy up a few loose ends.
I think there's something to be said. It's like one thing I hate about network shows is just when they overdo a character's arc just so they can off them on like a big like season finale episode or something. And technically, I guess they did off Littlefinger on a big season finale episode. But the abruptness of it, I kind of liked. Just kind of showing in this world that something. Sometimes you don't need a big ending. Sometimes just you step in the wrong shit.
Yeah, and I guess if anybody deserved an unceremonious death, it was Littlefinger.
Yeah, I mean, he was a plotter and a schemer, and it all came to naught. He was very clever, perhaps a little too clever for his own good. I read quite an interesting article by David Wong recently on Game of Thrones, and there's a lot of kind of, when everything gets too big, there's people out there kind of hating it. And you get the MCU, and people say, we're wasting our time with these mindless superhero movies, and Game of Thrones is just tits and dragons. But I think we forget the sheer epic scale of what we're actually witnessing. Even the least of the Marvel movies is far beyond the imagining of what we thought would be capable back when we were watching the, for example, He-Man live-action movie. So anyone who's kind of like grown up with this thinks it's normal. But I think for our generation, it's kind of, we're still fairly blown away by how incredible this is.
Oh yeah, I remember when Jurassic Park came out. I mean, I grew up watching like stop motion, claymation dinosaurs, people in bad dinosaur costumes, and then Jurassic Park came out, and I mean, at this point, yeah, we kind of look at like, another Jurassic World movie, who cares? But when that came out, that was mind fucking blowing seeing that on screen.
That was foundational for countless people. Like. I'm sure there are directors and writers and especially VFX people whose origin story was watching Jurassic Park.
Yeah, it was a world shaker. I mean, there are still parts of it now that are just embedded into the kind of meme consciousness of people. Like, you can't have, for a while, you couldn't have a big noise or a big presence coming without there being a shot of a glass of water rippling. It was iconic. We used to get a world changer maybe every couple of years, and now we seem to be getting one every 6 months, and that's pretty cool. But Game of Thrones is coming to an end. The MCU phase 1 MCU, I'd say as we know it, is coming to an end. So what I want to ask, the question I demand is answered: what do we think will rise to fill that mighty and impressive void?
Probably not the DCU.
I don't know, man. I would back a Legends movie.
Here's the thing about the DCU. It's kind of, there isn't one. There's the fits and starts at trying to have a DCU, and they keep on just, they get a few charming moments in there, but they can't seem to hold it together. So if next year they just said, right, we're wiping slate clean and starting again, no one would care, probably.
Nah, no major. I mean, except for the Gal Gadot Wonder Woman and the Jason Momoa Aquaman have some momentum now, especially the Gal Gadot one. But I don't think they would cut them. I think they would just be like, no one gives a shit. We'll roll them in.
Yeah, I mean, if they just started again and went, all right, it's the Justice League with Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman and Jason Momoa's Aquaman, and then some other guys.
Well, apparently people are digging Shazam, so.
Shazam was pretty good. You know what infuriates me about Henry Cavill as Superman? He's a great actor. I watched him in The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and it was fucking galling, because it was like, if you brought this charisma and energy to that role, you would be a fucking amazing Superman.
Yeah, I think he's been directed not to have any charisma or energy.
It's frustrating, because it's like, if he was bad at it, it would be one thing. But like, to watch him do another project and realize how much talent he actually has, and you're like, oh, this is just an extra fuck you.
He's such an incredibly charismatic guy that you got to hand it to Zack Snyder for squashing all of that.
Yeah, it's almost a magic trick.
Well, I think that's where the DCU is. They're kind of coming out of it. They started off with this whole, let's do dark and gritty, like, everything. And it just kind of shit the bed. And then, okay, people like Wonder Woman. But then, Aquaman came out, and it was just kind of light and dopey, and now they got Shazam again, light and dopey, and it's like I think they're kind of realizing that, you know something, guys, these are superheroes. It's not a bad thing. Not everybody has to be the Punisher.
Well, I mean, we talked about foundational movies and like things that echoed throughout, and fucking the Nolan Dark Knight trilogy destroyed the DC multiverse or universe before it ever got a swing out, because Nolan's thing worked for Batman for the same reason that Thor Ragnarok kind of works for Thor, because it just fits the character really well. But if you tried to strip that out and put it on a different character, it might not fly.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why the original 70s Superman movie persists. It gives you an iconic Superman who is essentially a Boy Scout.
They play it straight,
yeah.
And that's the thing that everyone avoids doing with Superman for some stupid reason. And you don't have to. He is the straight man. Play him straight.
Everybody except the CW show Supergirl. Amazingly, they've gotten Superman a lot more right lately than the movies have.
Oh yeah. That guy does a great job. All the tonal stuff, even if you don't necessarily agree with the acting and the plot choices, their tonal decisions for their respective shows, especially season 3 Legends on, have been very good.
But we're kind of getting off the path here.
Oh yeah,
we're not here to shit on DC. We're here to be like, what is the next big thing?
Yeah, I mean, you said that it definitely won't be DC, but I think we kind of maybe there was a little light of hope there that maybe it could be. Maybe there could be a DCU universe that rises up to meet the void in our hearts. I don't think so. But,
I think if they have a successful version of their worlds. I think if they just gave some of those actors and actresses a chance on a production, they could make their money back.
But I think what we all want to hear is our insightful finger on the pulse media guru, Robert Bevan. What do you think is going to rise up to take the place of the MCU or Game of Thrones?
Well, if it's up to Cartoon Network, I'd say it's Teen Titans Go.
That is it's an interesting speculation on how the DCU could save itself by utterly taking the piss out of everything its superheroes stand for.
That's a legit way to go.
Yeah. I mean, it's the complete opposite way of the way they've been trying to go. So,
I'd watch that one.
So your suggestion is yes to DCU, the ridiculous version.
Yeah.
I was looking for an appropriate word there that I can still say. I'll settle with ridiculous.
But I don't know. I think we may already be getting some of that. I mean, what was it? The Umbrella Academy on Netflix, and I think Amazon has something called The Boys coming out this summer, which seems to be just just kind of like trying to dropkick the superhero genre on its ear.
You're right. I know fucks given MCU equivalent. Whether it be the kind of hipster edge Umbrella Academy or what I understand to be a bit more of a gritty edge The Boys, or again the completely ridiculous but always entertaining Teen Titans Go approach. Maybe just superhero movies don't go away as the next big thing. They just change form.
I don't know if how I think The Boys will do, because granted, this is just based on the trailer. I'm not familiar with the source material. But it does look like it's kind of falling into a classic trap you see a lot of them trying to build this world of what if superheroes aren't as good as they pretend to be? And yeah, that's fine. We've seen that before. But the problem with those stories is they go way too far, and they're like, all of them are shit and they're secretly terrible and all that. But it doesn't work, because at its core, these are still people who picked up the mantle of helping humanity. You have to have a few sparks of decency and goodness in there for us to buy it as a concept. And it honestly, from the outset, it looks like it's just gonna be oh, okay, they're doing this again, and without any emotional anchor or I don't know, something to tether it in. It just reads like something I've seen 30 times already.
Even Watchmen had a spark of hope and whimsy in it. And that is the ultimate superhero deconstruction.
Or if you want a good example of that, The Tick on Amazon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking about The Tick in the same vein as Teen Titans Go, or not in the same vein, but more maybe in a Megamind sort of vein.
Yeah. The Tick at his base, even if he's surrounded by all these weirdos who are morons or whatever, the Tick is just this innocent good guy.
Yeah, the Tick believes in what he's doing.
Yeah, he is the heart of the show and the show's idea of a superhero mythos at the same time. So it kind of, you can have a shitty world around that. It's essentially, I guess, it's like how the DCU would have been if Superman had been Superman rather than just super angry.
Yeah, I mean, you said it right yourself. It needs a heart.
Yeah.
The Tick had that, and some of the shittier grim ones don't, and you can really feel it in the world.
Yeah. Now that movie that's coming out, Brightburn, I can dig that because they're basically saying we're not trying to establish a superhero world where superheroes are shit. They're kind of going full on horror with that. It seems.
I haven't seen previews for that one.
Oh.
Yeah, check that out.
Yeah, Brightburn. The whole. If you read if you watch the trailer is essentially, what if baby Clark Kal-El landed in Kansas, and he grew up, but it turned out the kid was just a fucking psycho.
Yeah, I mean, that's not trying to be a superhero. That's obviously trying to be the anti-superhero.
What you're trying to do a genre mashup. You're trying to mix superhero with horror, and that's fine. Like, mashups are great. That's different than a deconstruction.
Yeah.
Oh, wow, this looks fucking cool.
Then I just distracted Drew. Quick, let's switch topics before he gets back.
As for Game of Thrones, I think aren't they coming out with a prequel series, like set hundreds of years before?
When I say these things are dying and leaving, we all know that's not how capitalism works. They'll milk this cow until it's bones. Yeah. But
and also the reality is, how many times have we seen a prequel series that just sucks balls compared to the original?
But it's HBO.
I know it's HBO, but I mean, a lot of us had faith in sci-fi, like, after Battlestar Galactica, that Caprica would not suck like.
We've been burned too many times, Bevan. The Hobbit was Peter Jackson. Hobbit was Peter Jackson.
Can anybody name a good prequel series that happened after the original?
What are you talking?
I don't know, maybe.
I'm
many of these shows I get this invested in.
I'm coming up empty.
Yeah,
I'm coming up empty. Oh man.
I don't know. I mean, I know in this case it's just me, but prequels never catch my imagination because at some level it's kind of like we know what happens next.
Well, but in this case though, I don't know how much it's gonna. I don't know how much it cares about leading into the current story because it's set so far in the past. I think it's just more like, let's do another fantasy series in this world, and
they're trying to ride the momentum.
Yeah.
But then again,
it's not like we're seeing the boring fucking origin story of Darth Vader.
It's not the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
But if you think how dependent, I've never read the books, but you think how dependent the TV series is on certain really identifiable and long-lasting linchpin characters. Even someone like the Hound and Brienne and, Tyrion Lannister. You're going to have a series and none of them are going to be in it. And maybe it's just a failure of imagination on my part, but these people kind of make the show for me.
Me, I've spoken before about my irresponsible optimism. That's I got faith in HBO, and I've been, every time Pirates of the Caribbean 2, Burned, so many things that I always go into it thinking it'll be good. You guys are way off base. This is going to be awesome. No, never is. But I still think they're gonna pull something awesome out of their ass.
I think Bevan is the Superman of our DC universe.
Boy Scout, that's me.
See, I'm not sure I have that faith because the problem is I think there is always going to be that, that there a prequel, no matter how far back they go, they're always going to try to do something where they name drop to kind of be like, oh, see, look, here's somebody named Targaryen, or hey, I know we're 5,000 years before Star Wars, but look, here's Joe Skywalker.
I was thinking that's the thing I hate the most about prequels and kind of after the fact follow-ups. I hate it in the prequels, like, oh, and he built C-3PO. fuck off. Don't need to see 3PO in this. Don't need to see R2-D2. Don't have to tick these boxes. Just tell a good story. Same with The Force Awakens. Oh, look, they're in the Millennium Falcon. And there's the training droid. And there's the chess piece. It's like, I'm not a tourist. I'm here to watch a movie.
So I finally thought of one good prequel example that comes after most of the original source material. And even this, I'm sure people will have debate on. But I liked The Magician's Nephew in the Chronicles of Narnia book series. Like how, like right at the end, you go back and you actually get some interesting origin stuff for the world. And like there was signals that he had like planned it out and it laid some plot. And I don't know. It did a lot of the stuff we talked about. It explained like the lamppost and stuff. But it felt, it was a story that you didn't necessarily know was a prequel until you started getting to the end and seeing where it merged.
Oh, I've got one. Does this count? Better Call Saul?
Oh, it does.
Oh, yeah.
And you're right.
That's a fair one. Yeah.
And I'm going to go totally geeky, but Beast Wars.
Is Beast Wars a prequel or a spin-off?
No, Beast Wars, it was a spin-off, but it turned out as you watched it over the course of the first season that it was actually a prequel.
See, I don't mind that when you get
That's
a
a good
Planet
way
of
to
the
do
Apes
it.
style.
Yeah.
Oh, look, turns out that they blew it all up, and this is a prequel. That's
Well, if you're gonna if the prequelness of it is meant to be a surprise, then you're not gonna throw in the cheesy hints and nods to the original.
I think it's that obligation to try and cash in on the original that it's kind of a jumping through hoops thing that they have to do that detracts from the storytelling and the integrity of the product. I can't speak for The Magician's Nephew, but I think because I haven't read it, but Better Call Saul is something that kind of acknowledges those things. It's like his Tuco, he existed before, but really just concentrates on a completely different story. They don't mention Walter White. They don't give any hints to, I forget what it's called, Sky Blue.
Skyler?
No, whatever the meth was called.
Oh, right, okay.
The colourful meth. They don't need to hint at any of that because they are just telling a story with an established character. I think that's it. I think there's a good way of doing it and there's a cheap way of doing it, and too often Hollywood takes the cheap way of doing it.
We kind of got locked into prequel talk.
Yeah.
Well, this has turned out to be a lot more complicated discussion than I previously imagined.
It is. It's hard to try and find like what do we think is viable, and past that, what do we think is viable and is in the right people's eye line to actually get chosen.
All right. Well, let's take that off the table. Let's be children for a moment. Let's just, if you could decide what the next huge thing is, the next MCU level huge or Game of Thrones level huge television or cinematic extravaganza was going to be, what would you want it to be?
I would cut Mike Schur a blank check and tell him do whatever you want.
I'm not a names guy. You're going to have to explain who Mike Schur is.
Sorry, Mike Schur is a guy who works in TV, and he has produced several of the best shows of the last decade. He was responsible for Parks and Recreation. He co-created Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He worked on The Office. I don't think he was a creative force. He was Moe's on The Office, actually. And he is, of course, the head architect behind The Good Place, which is one of the most complex, smartly written, created shows in existence.
I wasn't aware that you liked this show, Drew.
Yeah, I know, right? I never talk about it.
Well, listeners are familiar. You may recognize The Good Place as the show Drew always talks about.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
Oh God, as someone who like gets obsessive about details and like foreshadowing all that intricate plot stuff, it's so much fun to go back and rewatch through. So yeah, if I was truly childlike wonder getting to choose what the next big thing was, I don't need an individual property when there is a creator who has been churning out such incredible work and like has corralled an amazing cast of actors who love to work with him. And so it's like, yeah, I would truly, if this was the thing, I would just hand Mike Schur a blank check and say, do whatever you want, buddy.
You know what? I absolutely agree with you. I love all those shows. I especially love The Good Place, of which you recommended to me. Probably no surprise for our listeners. I think most of the people listening to us have watched that show based on your recommendation. Yeah, you're right. That's actually, it sounds to me like a sound business decision. I think if I was a studio head, I'd probably just get this guy and go, how much money just to to lock you in a room and milk the ideas from your head.
That's actually how we got The Good Place. That's literally how that happened. They just handed Mike Schur a 13-season thing and said, whatever you want.
Oh, nice. I mean, that's a really good answer, Drew. It's a really sensible answer. But I'm not here for sensible. That's not why people tune in.
And you know something? I think that takes care of the small screen, but like, you know, I might question how well that vision translates to the big screen.
That's fair, but Steve said whatever, and I think he might pick a movie, and I'll trust him. But you're right; it would probably be another amazing TV show.
I mean, if we're gonna do that with that same mindset with that, I mean, there's a couple directors I would probably say, hey, studios, just give these guys $100 million and just get the fuck out of their way.
Yeah,
guys like Guillermo del Toro or God, what was his name? The guy who did Deadpool, Tim Miller or something, or
Jordan Peele's probably the best recent example of somebody saying, "Oh, maybe we should just let this guy do what he wants to do. Maybe he's got some good ideas we should let him explore without tripping him up."
Ooh, you know who I could cut a blank movie check to without a second's hesitation? Lord and Miller, the guys who did Lego Movie. Into the Spider-Verse, I think they helped on, right?
Tried to do Solo, but were taken off the project for some reason.
They touch these projects that should be absolutely commercial monsters, and they inject them with so much heart.
That's probably why they got fired from Solo. There's too much heart in this movie. Make it more soulless and disappointing.
It's like, do you see this Chewbacca action figure? You need to sell this.
Stop trying to make me feel feelings and make me some fucking money, Lord and Miller.
I mean, did they not have Lego's number to call them and ask how that movie went over on their sales? Jesus Christ, Star Wars. When do you need to show some fucking faith?
They had your product in their movie, Star Wars. You've got the figures on this. Yeah. Well, there is something to be said. And it amazes me it doesn't happen as often as it does, because sometimes a director will stand up, and even people who don't know shit about film will watch something and recognize it has a certain something. And the people who do know shit about film should be saying, all right, let's just give this guy a check and get out of his way. And they don't do that often enough. Even though when they do, it's almost always a kind of game changer.
Yeah. Or sometimes it's not. I mean, what was it? The guy who directed Fantastic Four came off of a much smaller film that was much better, and then they handed him all this money and said, "Hey, make Fantastic Four," and apparently it just turned into a giant fucking train wreck.
Yeah, but I mean,
some people do not scale.
Yeah, well, imagine, Rick, you released your first book and it did very well. And in response, a company came to you and said, all right, cool. Now we want you to write this 7-book intricate series. No take-backsies. And we're going to cut around anything we don't like.
Yeah, I mean, this is basically, they said to him, oh, you made a really good film here. We want you to make a stop-motion animation with this dog turd we found.
He needed a little more practice, probably. That's a huge jump in terms of production scale alone.
Yeah, but some people are able to make that huge jump, and I understand. Whenever a studio gets involved, you just almost always have shit. Because the money men will be like, oh, look, we've all heard probably the horror stories about Superman Lives. And the bullshit that movie went through. It's like, we need to have Superman fight a giant spider. Why? Because I like giant spiders and I like cocaine.
That was also I think that's also what happened in Wild Wild West. Like literally, we want a giant spider.
Well, apparently, the giant spider from Wild Wild West, from what I read, came because that Superman Lives project never got off the ground. So,
all right,
yeah. So they basically are like, I'm going to get my giant fucking spider no matter what.
Look, I've got too much money. I've got a drug-addled brain. I can't stop thinking about giant spiders. In any other society in the world, they just lock me up for my own good. But this is Hollywood, damn it, and I will get what I want.
The problem is the middlemen, will get involved and And yes, occasionally there are always going to be instances of like a Stanley Kubrick who's who might be brilliant but is batshit crazy, who probably needs to be reined in. But I think more often than not, when the studios like, they just step in and say, oh, you must do this and you must do this and you must do this, and they just take an otherwise viable good project and turn it into utter shit.
Well, they're always going to steer toward the middle, and that's not where creativity lives. It lives in risks.
Well, there are great producers, and there are we recognize, I guess we're lean towards the artists, but I think we all kind of understand it enough to know why they're a necessity. And, there is a setup. They'll do X amount of commercial movies and then something they really want to do. But I think there are movies that are made by committee, and I think most people can just sort of smell them before the opening credits are done. Like I say, it's easy to get kind of hipster about movie speak and getting into the mechanics of it. But in my experience, most people, even if they don't have the kind of language and experience to articulate why something's a piece of shit, they can just kind of tell why a movie hasn't worked. And I think that generally seems to happen on, again, like movies by committee, where no solid vision was presented.
Yeah. I mean, even movies that like suck at the box office but are inherently good, they usually tend to develop a cult following afterward.
Yeah, that's true. And likewise, there might be movies that really go for guns on the box office because everybody's just ready for that kind of distraction, and then they just kind of sink and are never recalled fondly.
Yeah, I was looking at the 50 Shades of Grey movies, which made apparently a shitload of money, but I don't know. I think if you were to line people up and at gunpoint and to find somebody who who actually watched that again and again on HBO.
I love how we just sometimes get terrifying glimpses into Rick's dystopia of his mind.
Well, it's unfortunately nobody's given me $100 million to bring that to the screen.
It's vitally important that they don't.
Rick's version of Fahrenheit 451 is everyone has to watch the 50 Shades of Grey movies on constant loop.
Yeah, it's that scene from Clockwork Orange, except they're putting the eye drops in and they're making you watch that for the 47th time.
Can I at least jerk off? No.
All right, other than that, derail into Rick's dystopia universe. We're kind of getting back into being quite insightful and looking at the mechanics of why things are successful. But what we're looking at here is, in this non-Rick dystopia we're looking at, the MCU is gone, Game of Thrones is gone, and we're asking ourselves, what would we like? No, doesn't have to be practical, doesn't have to be pragmatic. What would you like to see have that kind of pervasive cultural weight?
Are you asking anyone in particular?
Kung fu movies.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm with Rick.
Okay.
Actually, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that'd be good.
Anime style live action Dragon Ball Z universe done with the same care and attention as the MCU.
Yeah, I don't mean like artistic shit like, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. Exactly. Like a brutal, almost like a big budget, like Into the Badlands type stuff.
I think Rick wants to live in the world from The Last Dragon where entire movie theaters are filled to the brim with people going to see old kung fu movies.
Oh man, can you imagine an extended universe of The Last Dragon?
Oh, I would watch the shit out of that.
Just a world where that kind of scenario exists and is like fairly common. Oh man.
You go to your Pilates class, you're like, they got the guy shooting arrows at you.
I mean, really, if you just build that whole world on the concept that guns are $50,000 a piece or something to explain why there's one and only the rich guy has it, it does sort of make sense. It's like, okay, well, this is still a violent time, but if guns aren't around, then, I guess everyone's just into martial arts.
But there are no guns. Everyone's racially confused, but, we're having a good time.
Oh, and magic exists.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, there is magic in The Last Dragon.
Honestly, I think, I'm a fairly grounded guy, but I think if we had the first three ingredients of, I think magic would just happen. I think it would just come into existence. I think I would believe in magic again if everybody was just, kicking the shit out of each other in movie theaters with elaborate kung fu moves and interesting costumes. That in itself is what magic is all about.
Which again, I am convinced that Into the Badlands is is The Last Dragon set 100 years in the future.
Not even 100. It's like 2 years after Leroy Jenkins. That's just the inevitable conclusion of The Last Dragon is Into the Badlands. I'd buy that. I'd watch at least 15 cinematic big budget movies based around that concept. But yeah, does anyone have anything more audacious than a Last Dragon extended movie universe?
Well, to make this clear to the audience, we have been told to not pick our own shit. So won't do that. However, I'm just gonna pick genre. I just think there's not enough comedy fantasy in the world, and I want a shit ton of that.
You guys never watched Yonderland, did you?
No.
It's a British show by a bunch of guys who used to do a thing called Horrible History, which is if you imagine Monty Python looking at the history of the world, but for children. They did a thing called Yonderland, which was about somebody who goes into a mystery land, but it's a fantasy land with elves and magic and wizards, but everybody's a ridiculous Monty Python style character. And it just didn't take off as I think it should have, perhaps because it was British and not particularly mainstream.
Oh,
But, I agree, because I think, in this scenario, we're saying what would we want to see have the same pervasiveness as Game of Thrones? Yeah, I'd like to see something like Game of Thrones, but funny and ridiculous.
Yeah, maybe like a Game of Thrones style or a Game of Thrones-esque Your Highness universe.
Or what about an R-rated comedic take on the Bible?
Ooh.
That would be fun. I've actually thought about writing that.
Ooh, that's a good one, Bevan.
The Gospel according to Robert Bevan.
I am not going to encourage you on that one, because if I do, I know I'm going to get blamed for the pushback. I learned from Space Puppies.
I have an unwritten outline for a book called Battleship Ark that is essentially about Noah versus sentient dinosaurs.
Right
Imagine,
Rick.
like, 15 years from now, just Robert Bevan being crucified on a hill.
15?
No,
Drew
actually,
Hayes and
I've
Rick
got-
Gualtieri beside him.
I've got scenes planned out, like, them talking to Thomas in the aftermath. You wanted to put your fucking hands in his holes? What's wrong with you?
God damn it, Bevan. I do want you to write this.
You guys heard it.
Yeah. I'm always the
entirely
voice
Drew's
of.
fault.
I'm always the bad voice. Sorry, I keep having unwavering faith in you.
Our Lord Christ has disappeared from his tomb. He must have risen. 2 minutes later, somebody's looking on their phone. Yeah, I found his body for sale on eBay.
Jesus.
So I thought of a good comedic fantasy one, and we can shout out a fellow indie guy, Scott Meyer's Magic 2.0 series. I feel like
that could do.
That world has a lot of potential for building off of like a bunch of different stories and different worlds about different people. It's a cool concept, and if you haven't read Off to Be the Wizard, it's a really fun book.
Yeah, that's a solid starting point for the idea of a pervasive comedy fantasy universe. If we can't use critical failures, which we can't. Yeah, I'd be up for that. I mean, I still want my huge budget, moody 3-hour-long Hawk the Slayer, but I recognise that's a universe where only I win. I'd buy into both of them so far. If we all of a sudden had ridiculous post-apocalyptic magic kung fu movies in the Last Dragon extended universe, I'd take that. I'd take a comedy fantasy extended universe. What else we got?
It's like, yeah, I like that idea with big budget, because one of the problems with comedy is that they always skimp on the special effects. And I guess it's part of it is to try to be funny or so, but it's kind of annoying.
Somebody pointed this out. I can't remember who it was, but everybody loves comedy. Everybody and all the other types of movie have some kind of comedy in it. But you never see a comedy winning the Oscars. When film geeks get together, they rarely rate a comedy as their favorite movie. I mean,
well, they want to be taken seriously, I think.
Yeah. I mean, there's a little bit of bias, like in the theater, toward Again, this is just from, again, high school level, college, but even then, it was very like comedy was never treated the same way as dramatic roles. Dramatic roles were always like, oh man, that has weight and that's power. That you're doing something there. Comedy's like, hey, cool, you got some laughs, buddy.
Yeah, but that's, I understand that attitude, but that attitude inherently means that comedy is somehow, well, less difficult to do than drama. And I'd say probably harder.
Oh, 100% agree. I don't agree with the bias, but the bias exists.
I think it's because people consider comedy a guilty pleasure. Like a lot of, you're right. These movie critics were like, they'll be like, it's like, I really enjoyed like the 16-hour biopic on like Gandhi's life. But you know something? If basically they had a choice between you could watch this for all of eternity, or you could watch the original Ghostbusters. I'm pretty sure. What would get chosen there?
I mean, I'm a little bit of a hipster fuckwit when it comes to movies. I do like kind of picking stuff I think is mechanically interesting. But I'm a sucker for comedy. It's kind of, I don't get why there is a bias around it. It's as though it doesn't take talent to frame a comedic scene as well as dramatic scene. It's like it doesn't take talent to build a punchline in the same way it takes to build tension or romance. It's kind of, not only does it take talent, but it probably takes a bit more talent and a bit more kind of instinct.
There's a reason. There's a reason for the phrase "death is easy, comedy is hard."
Yeah. I mean, I have a slight theory on it, and it's just basically comes down to emotional resonance. A great joke in a movie that makes you truly like laugh until you're gasping for air is going to stick with you. But when you rewatch that movie, it's not going to land the same way. Because you know it's coming and etc. But a dramatic moment, like a real tearjerker or an inspiration, hell, the Rocky music. If I start playing that, a lot of you are going to feel the hairs on the back of your neck stand up because it's so deeply ingrained, like to certain emotions that have been drilled into you through the course of that movie series. And those do still play. Most of the cues and everything still work. So my main theory is that comedy doesn't get the same lasting respect because it's a lot easier to walk away from those feelings than it is like when you rewatch it, you're like, oh yeah, that was funny. Whereas you're like, oh God, I'm crying again.
I totally agree. I'm going to come up with one of my ridiculous analogies that don't quite make sense. And then Robert Bevan points out they don't quite make sense. It's a bit like the difference between being tickled and being punched in the face. You can get used to being tickled, but you never get used to being punched in the face.
I can't get used to being tickled.
Neither can I. And actually, I got to be honest, I got to disagree, Drew, because I know there. And yes, I think the first time you see anything, the emotional resonance is the heaviest. But I know that there are dramatic scenes I see again, and I'll be honest, I don't cry. If I do cry at the first time, I very seldom cry the second time because I know it's coming. But I mean, which is no different than a comedy scene, because there are lines out there in movies or shows that I will see over and over again. And yes, they don't crack me up quite the same way the first time, but they bring me they bring me similar joy again and again.
I would wager that we are not good case studies to use in this, though, because we all chose to work in comedy, meaning it's clearly resonating with us a little bit longer.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with the argument I was going to present, and didn't present it for that reason, but also, I will go back and watch a comedy over and over again, whereas I typically don't do that with a dramatic movie.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I could be 1,000% off. I don't know why comedy doesn't get the respect. I don't think anybody knows for sure. It's kind of just a shitty thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch Planes, Trains and Automobiles anytime it's on. If it comes on, I'll watch it, even though I know the beats off by heart by now. They'll still kind of, I won't be laughing out loud. It won't be like being tickled, but it still does kind of bring that joy, and that's, I'll still smirk at it. But, I'm an emotional wreck. I think I started crying at the end of Shrek 2. So I'm a poor judge at this, of what's supposed to be emotionally normal when watching movies. But I'd certainly agree with Bevan that I'll definitely rewatch comedies. I'm far more likely to rewatch something that will make me laugh than something that will
I understand.
challenge me in different emotional ways.
Yeah, I understand that emotional stuntedness. I remember I watched this. I think this one movie I watched in the theaters. In fact, I think it was Willow. It was the very beginning, where the main character, or like the little girl's mother, is sentenced to death, and just the way, like, the evil queen was like, yeah, just kill her. I chuckled in the theater, and there was nothing but silence around me. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll just go get some popcorn.
Maybe stick to comedy. Again, we've this was supposed to be a bonus section, but we've been talking to this about 45 minutes now, and it has got a lot more kind of in depth than I thought it would be. But then again, I guess we are talking about what we love, and our main topic was going to be guilty pleasures. I think we could safely transition into that, because we have sort of been talking about our guilty pleasures, what we'd like to see out in the world. But yeah, so let's transition away from the spectre of the death of the MCU and the death of Game of Thrones and what we might dig up from their graves. Yeah, let's just move into guilty pleasures of the media variety. Who wants to start?
I'll go. All right. Because I have two kids, Cartoon Network is on all the time at my house, and and Cartoon Network means Teen Titans Go is on about 24/7, and I've grown to really enjoy that show. And I think most of our audience knows I'm not a big superhero fan, but I do like their ridiculousness, like I talked about before. And I also, I look at things on YouTube and stuff, and I know there's a bunch of people that, like the original Teen Titans, and part of me loves that it pisses them off. So that's, more guilty in my pleasure.
That's good. I'll admit I enjoyed the original Teen Titans cartoon more, only because it was kind of in the same vein as, like, Batman the Animated Series. But but the fact that Teen Titans Go exists has never really pissed me off.
It was a good show.
I don't know if people are pissed that it exists so much as they are that it's just completely taken over.
Well, I think so the big problem with Teen Titans Go is sort of emblematic of a major issue with people in our culture, is not recognizing when art is not for them. Because the original Teen Titans, when that came out, like, I was in the target audience for it, and I loved it, and I watched that, like, I remember watching it the night before I went to college, randomly catching it on the TV at the hotel, and then, like, catching a finale a little bit, like, before I was going to graduate. And it was just like it really hooked into me at that point. But by the time Go came out, I was not in the target market anymore. And it's important to remember, these are not for adults first. These are for kids. And a lot of people couldn't deal with the fact that something was being made that wasn't for them, even though it was using things they liked.
They're kind of for adults, though, because most of the shows have references that go way over my kids' heads, like, or and I'm not just talking about like dick jokes or anything. I'm talking about back to the Goonies and stuff. There's a whole episode, and I've showed my kids the Goonies. I'm not a monster, but I think that was meant more for me than for them.
Well, yeah. Sliding jokes in for the parents is like a long-standing tradition in kids' TV.
No, but this was a full-on episode.
Well, I think there's a kind of, I agree with Drew, but I would kind of reinterpret that is when you feel like you're a part of something, when you're there for the kind of big reveal and it's a part of your culture, you do feel a sense of ownership from it. Me, I've always kind of been a bit of a contrarian dickweed, so I don't really get into that as much. So I didn't really consider Teen Titans, the original anime. I think I was probably a little bit old to say that belonged to me anyway. But I never stopped watching cartoons, despite how many girlfriends it lost me. And so when Teen Titans Go came along, you got to have the perspective. It's like, okay, that other Teen Titans happened, and it was good for X reason. But now there's this new Teen Titans, and it's good for X reason, and I can enjoy both. because we have the internet and I can watch whatever I want, whenever I want, because I'm a fucking grown-up.
Dude, I literally had to have like a moment of this the other week because I was watching a video about interesting facts on the old Jackie Chan Adventures, which was an awesome fucking show from way back.
Yeah.
And at the end, they started talking about like the reboot and the sequel series, and I was like, "Wait, what? What the fuck?" And then they started showing clips from it, and I was just like, "Oh crap! It's the cheap CGI, and it's all kids." And I'm like, "Oh right, yeah, no, this was a kid's show. This was always a kid's show. I'm just not a kid anymore. I have to make a mental peace with that."
Well, let's add the caveat. It doesn't mean you get to be shit. You can still look back on something you used to watch and go, is this good because it was good, or is it good because it was nostalgia? And you could say that about the remake. You'd say, is this bad because of my nostalgia, or is it bad because it's a piece of shit? And sometimes it is just...
Well, I mean, you can also say, is it bad because it's not for you? Like, I feel like a lot of people don't take that into account as much as they really should when they're selecting their media or like evaluating media.
I think the best way to really judge that is how popular, how long it lasts. If something comes up that, like, hey, here's a sequel series and it lasts for one season, there might be a good chance that it sucks.
Yeah.
Versus if it has that appeal, like, like, hey, like I never got into Pokemon. It was never really a show I really gave a crap about, but there was appeal around there, so that was pretty easy to say, okay, this is appealing, but just not to me. It's not for me.
Right.
Yeah. On Rick's point, I'd like to think I have enough of an eye to look at something and recognize what it's trying to be and say, well, it doesn't matter. It's successful when it's trying to be, but I don't like this sort of thing, so I'll keep my mouth shut about it. Or I know what it's trying to be, and it's failing to be that. If you get my meaning.
Yeah. I mean, you can still be bad at what you try to do. Like a movie that's for kids isn't inherently above criticism just because it's for kids. But by the same token, I don't think that I, as a 30-whatever-year-old dude, am going to be capable of arbiting its quality independently because. For the same reason that my friends' kids will watch Paw Patrol and, 10 seconds of watching that screen makes me want to tear my eyes out. But obviously it's an extreme example, but it does illustrate the point. Like, I'm not going to be arbiting whether that's good or not for a very obvious reason.
I would be very worried if I heard you were a closet Paw Patrol fan.
God damn.
Bubble Guppies is on. Let me put...
There's some grown-ups dressed in those costumes fucking each other.
Well, fine. You know what? Maybe they found something in it for them.
It's not for me. Yeah, but I recognize what they're trying to do.
Yeah, but I'm kind of with Steve. I mean, I've grown up watching TV, and like I like to think I have a handle on like what's just not for me versus, dear God, this sucks. And I'm not saying I'm always right,
Yeah.
Well, yeah, no one's always right, except for me.
I'm more talking about like the extreme reactions we see, like the Thundercats blowback.
Yeah.
The still people pissy about Teen Titans Go. Like that's kind of more what I'm illustrating, more than just I didn't enjoy that. I didn't think that was good.
But I think we can all agree that you're never right enough about an opinion to harass someone on the internet like a fucking dick.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid statement.
Yeah. It's like, one, you do not own, unless you are J.K. Rowling, you do not own Harry Potter, And yes, it is okay if you want to be a fan about it, but something, if you just want to shit on somebody because in book 1 they like Snape, go fuck yourself.
Also, even if you're J.K. Rowling, maybe take a week off Twitter.
I was just about to say that goes doubly for you, J.K.
Maybe she's a bad example right at this moment.
I mean, we're most of us in a position where we've got kids, just like spinning off in this subject for a while, and they watch things that it's not like in my day where my dad would go, "Oh, look at this old Lone Ranger serial," and I'd go, "That shit, Dad. I'm not interested in that." My kids now. My daughter's well into YouTubers, and she's always got headphones on. And I never know what she's saying, but she's in something called Wednesdays with Lisa. It's got like 3 Zs in it. And she's just basically a one-woman comedian. She's like a really goofy kind of American Mr. Bean, and she's I think she's great. It's kind of. I was watching it. I think my daughter was getting steadily annoyed because she's like, we made her put it on the big TV, and me and her mum were watching it, and we were laughing along and going, this is ridiculous. And my daughter was kind of fuming, going, this ain't for you. I was like, yeah, I know it's not for me. And so I kind of pretend not to like the things that she likes. She's into all kind of weird things. Doki Doki Literature Club, people making musicals about video games I've never heard of. But it's kind of, I really kind of dig the existence of that culture while fully recognizing it's not for me.
You know, Steve, you're a better parent than me because I remember doing that. I remember doing that with my kids with with Avatar: The Last Airbender, because they started watching it, and I sat down, and after a little while, I didn't give a shit if they liked it. I was like, and when they were out of it, Dad, we don't watch that anymore. I don't give a shit. I watch it now.
Also, check your taste at the door, kids, because that shit was good all the way through.
Yeah, that's like me and my family with Mario Kart. Dad, I don't want to play Mario Kart. It's family time. Set it up.
I was doing that just last night. Saying to my stepson, he's 16, he's getting on a bit. I'm like, why don't you play Octopath Traveler? Oh, well, I don't know. I'm like, play Octopath Traveler. I'm going to watch you play Octopath Traveler, and we're going to have some fucking family time.
It's you don't want to have family time? Do you pay the rent here? Well, no. Okay, then you're going to have fucking family time.
We're going to enjoy this together. Now spend 3 hours grinding that character so he can take on the bus. Or so I can take on the bus.
All right, so moving on. It's mentioning cartoons, I think along those same lines as Teen Titans Go, one cartoon I will tune into any given time is Invader Zim.
You know that I recognize that purely from a lot of people saying it's classic, but I've never actually watched it. I don't think it really took off in the UK.
The thing I love most about it is Nickelodeon hired this guy who's basically, his claim to fame at that point was some comic book. I think it was called something like Johnny the Teenage Psycho or something, which was pretty much about exactly what it sounds like. They hired him to do this kids cartoon. He basically just went absolutely batshit with it and made this cartoon that really is not a kid's cartoon. And Nickelodeon hated him for it, and he hated them right back for it. And it just made the entire thing delicious. There was a lot of that going on
at Nickelodeon at the time, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, almost the entire run of Invader Zim is almost like a giant middle finger to Nickelodeon.
But they kept on making those mistakes, like Ren and Stimpy, and they had a spin-off cartoon, and was Earthworm Jim Nickelodeon? They kept on getting these cartoons were just like Rocco's Modern Life. It's just like, your kids won't find this funny, but your weird uncle will.
I think Rocco did pretty well. That ran for a long time.
Yeah, but it got really weird in the last seasons. It got really kind of, I remember watching it as I must have been about 15 at the time, so not a young kid, but just thinking, this is kind of fucked up. But in a good way. I enjoyed it.
I guess part of the thing is when you get older, you start to underestimate kids, and you forget that like a lot of kids, like, you know, the mindless shit still has to be a little edgy to, like, you know, to kind of entertain them.
Yeah, I think you do. Again, it's kind of a hipster thing where you can spend a lot of time learning the kind of mechanics and the appropriate terms to analyze media and have kind of informed opinion on it. But mostly all you're doing is kind of giving words to what people instinctually know anyway. So often kids, they kind of glom on to what's cool a lot more efficiently than you do. And then I sit there saying a load of big words at them, so I feel good about myself.
Yes, kids are stupid, but they're not as stupid as we adults for some reason. And at some point, decided, you know, they're not going to be traumatized because their entire, like, you know, because every cartoon doesn't have a lesson.
Yeah,
you know?
They're not socially stupid. We assume they're socially stupid because they can't socialize with adults, but they're smart enough to know that a lot of our boundaries are just like arbitrary bullshit.
Yeah, like most of us growing up, we survived those metal death trap playgrounds. You know, just fine.
Those of us who didn't grow up, so you know, trial and error.
They don't get a say on this podcast.
It's evolution, baby.
Yeah, but especially recently, at some point recently, we decided that kids need to be just like covered in in bubble wrap and stuff with everything they do. And
the lessons. You're right about the fucking lessons.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
I guess the question is, how much do the kids like it? Because that's the real judge of whether it's quality.
That's my.
I would also think the real judge of quality is to ask the kids what portions of it, because I think if you have any like popular thing, a grown up is going to look and be like, oh, well, the kids obviously appreciate this because of the values it teaches, you know. Whereas the kid is like, I like watching He-Man because he occasionally punches out Skeletor. Oh, and there's a guy named Fisto on it.
I guess I could also say, and this is as an outsider to parenting, but based on my understanding, a measurement of quality could be, does it shut them up?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I'm going to take Steven Universe as an example, because Adventure Time got huge, and I'd sit down with Adventure Time and watch it with my kids, and they'd love it, and I'd love it. I thought Adventure Time was great. Steven Universe got huge, and I'd sit down with my kids, and they just weren't interested. And I kind of got the impression from Steven Universe that it wasn't actually for kids. It was for grown-ups that like cartoons. It's just kind of a weird vibe I got from it. It seemed to be a very kind of peaceful, sort of lulling non-cartoon, whereas Adventure Time was anarchic and strange and all the things that I liked about cartoons when I was a kid.
I think my kids liked Steven Universe for like 15 minutes. I never gave it a fair shot because I didn't like the character design. I didn't like what they looked like.
Cal isn't it? That's kind of taken off now. I was looking at comic book Kickstarters today, and there's a lot of that art style about now. It seems to be very well established in the mainstream. I like the visuals of it. I thought the stories were a bit strange. Everybody was either singing or crying or telling a joke that wasn't very funny. I don't know. It just felt something more like a hipster appreciation anti-cartoon rather than the kind of, like I say, an anarchic and bizarre and willfully stupid cartoons that I'm used to and my kids seem to enjoy.
Well, going back to Adventure Time, there's a lot of stupid in that, and it's fun and crazy, but there's also some weird, mellow moments that I find equally entertaining, and sometimes those are weird, like the song, "Daddy, why did you eat my fries?"
Yeah,
I love that. I've watched that a few times in a loop on YouTube.
I don't know. I think there is some kind of weird X Factor thing there that with cartoons you can sit down with your kids and your kids enjoy it as much as you do. I think Steven Universe was strangely more on the grown-up side, even though it was less kind of risky than what I'm used to. And Adventure Zone was kind of a sweet spot in the middle, whereas something like Rocko's Modern Life these days, I think, would be more to the appealing slightly more to grown-ups, like Ren and Stimpy did, but, with less anal sex jokes.
Then you have the really dense, narrative-heavy ones that are like trying to be. I mean, like Gravity Falls was basically Twin Peaks for kids, and I mean that in a very good way. Like it was strange and it was weird and it demanded that you pay attention.
Well, I love Twin Peaks and I love traumatizing children, so that sounds right up my alley.
Gravity.
You haven't seen Gravity Falls?
Oh, you'd love Gravity Falls.
I watched a clip of the manly mooses, was it?
The Manitars.
The Manitars.
Turkey.
But no, I haven't watched it all the way through. Again, it's not something that took off particularly in the UK. And I can't just watch it by myself as a grown man. There are certain expectations I have to have of myself. I have to have the children there to at least give some feasible kind of, accountability.
Again, screw that. I mean, my kids were walking through like the living room as I was watching Dragon Prince the other day. I was, hey, want to watch it, Dad? No, Dad.
I don't
Fine,
have kids.
screw you.
I've seen every DuckTales multiple times. Also, a very good, dense, like story narrative. You have to pay attention to get all the jokes. DuckTales.
Yeah, but I take the whole thing of like, I pay the bills here. You don't get to judge me.
I mean, they can judge. You just don't have to care.
Exactly.
Rick's sitting there on the sofa in a Sailor Moon costume. This is how it is, kids.
Well, something that is probably the only thing that is cool about being an adult. Like I remember being a teenager, and like those of you who've listened to this, you might have heard that I might be a slight bit of a Transformers fan. And I remember as a teenager going and like, just starting my get my collection going. And I was really embarrassed because like, the other people behind the counter were like, they were looking at, because they were my age and they were like judging the shit out of me. Nowadays, I don't give up. It's like, is this for you? Dude, just bring it the fuck up. I don't need to care what your fucking opinion is.
You work in a shop that sells Transformers, mate. Get off your high horse.
No change, thanks.
Yeah.
No, I agree. It's a lot more acceptable to be a goofy bastard of an adult these days, and I think that's a wonderful thing. I know I come off as a bit of a hipster gatekeeper, resentful, bitter prick now and then, but I really do hope, as much as saying about the MCU universe ending and Game of Thrones ending, I do hope this kind of geek acceptability continues to resonate. I think it makes the world a more fun place. There
was actually an article today that some people were sharing around that D&D is now considered acceptably cool.
Oh yeah, I mean not even acceptably cool. I'd say it's pop now. It's
mainstream.
We'll get people out there who are kind of like desperately downloading Dungeon Master's guides so they can impress people at dinner parties. I don't doubt that for a moment.
Now we can be bitter and be like, yeah, I liked it back when they were kicking my ass for liking it.
Exactly, we can. But we're a different animal. We grew up in a different jungle. We are a different animal. And I wish all these fucking posers the best.
I think some of it might just straight up be the internet. Like, we realize we're not as alone as we think we are.
Yeah.
Nowadays, I find it's like a measure of status to have a book with a 20-sided die featured prominently in your living room.
Bevan, but where can I find such a thing? Where can I find such a coffee table filler to impress my newfound Dungeons and Dragons appreciating friends?
Here and there.
Who might be assholes just like you.
Yeah, it's kind of, I guess, younger, more contrarian me would have been outraged to see the mainstream absorb something that is part of my pointlessly bitter and contrarian identity. But I genuinely do believe it's fun. It's fun to see your guilty pleasures become less guilty.
That pretty much brings us full circle in that whole. And the second something gets popular, people will start hating on it. It's like one of the cycles of popularity.
Oh, there's the whole, I've never seen an episode of Game of Thrones.
Oh, congratulations, you fucking doink. You know who else hasn't seen an episode of Game of Thrones? A fucking blind monkey. It doesn't take any effort to not appreciate something. It's not being a critic, because there's no artistry or analysis in it. It is just literally being, it's like, well, I haven't even looked in that direction. Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, hell, I'll be honest, I'll own it. I stayed fairly silent during the GOT discussion because I read the first book and watched the pilot episode and just didn't particularly feel it. But again, going back to I was like, this looks well made, but like, I don't know, the tone doesn't feel like it hits my sweet spot, so I'm gonna pass.
Well, that's the thing, though, is people who tend to try something and it's just not for them, they tend to just move on and not wear it as a badge of honor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not liking something has never seemed like a point of pride in any capacity.
Exactly. Unless we're talking about Ghostbusters 2016, which I take full pride in being a member of the Resistance.
But here's the thing. But here's the thing: you have seen the movie at least twice now.
Yeah, I feel like we've made it kind of fun.
And here's the thing: if like, there's two ways to go about it. Yeah, I've seen a couple episodes of Game of Thrones. It wasn't for me. Okay, no big deal.
Oh yeah, no, I totally appreciate it.
Or hey, I've watched Ghostbusters. I've seen it, but it's the whole. I haven't seen it. I have no interest in it, and I'm going to tell you about that anyway. That's the crowd, that kind of just needs that punch in the face.
Yeah, I mean, there's a certain middle ground there. I remember talking to it was a younger lady at work, which is very cool, and I liked her a lot. We're talking about Star Wars, and she was like, I don't really like Star Wars. I was kind of, well, that's fair enough. When did you decide you didn't like it? It's like, well, I watched The Phantom Menace, and I was like, stop right there. Stop right there. You haven't seen Star Wars. And I blacked out for a minute, so that's kind of the middle ground. If you haven't watched something properly, there is sometimes a proper way to watch something. But, Drew, you've read one of the Game of Thrones books, which is one more Game of Thrones books than I have read. And you gave the television program a chance, and you're saying it's not for you, which is a lot different from you just climbing onto your mountaintop, hoisting your flag, and shouting to the world, I haven't even seen Game of Thrones.
Yeah. NPCs by Drew Hayes, who has never seen Game of Thrones.
Yeah, it's like in bold.
Did I mention at this dinner party, I have not seen a single episode of Game of Thrones.
Several times now, yes.
Yeah. Sir, this is a Wendy's. Please sit down. I will say I'm glad that the things are changing. Like, because as much as it's like, oh, the things I like are mainstream, and that does sometimes make it feel a little less special than the way that, when you had D&D and it was a little bit of a low-key thing. When you met someone else who played D&D and you like got past the double speak, it was like you were instantly bonded because you had this shared hidden thing. And yes, losing that does suck a little bit, but it's so much better that there are people who can just openly like it and not have to hide and not have to do double talk. Like that's fucking way better.
Yes.
That means better. I don't have to get a real job.
But there's always going to be things that are underground and like, only a few people dig them and stuff. So it's like that's fine too.
Yeah. As long as you don't assume it gives you some kind of magic power, because it doesn't. And that's me talking to my teenage self there. It doesn't make you any more special than a grown man who's into My Little Pony. That conversation we had tended to be a little deeper in places than I thought it would be.
We swerved all over on this one.
Yeah. I think we've got into kind of the heart of not just what we expect from the mainstream and what makes a guilty pleasure, and whether guilty pleasures can even be considered guilty pleasures anymore.
Oh yeah, they can.
Yeah, mine could. I mean, I doubled down on mine.
All right, let's close out by each listing one thing that we would definitely say is probably still a guilty pleasure, like something that even now it's like, oh, I'll probably get guff for this, and I will open, because if I'm gonna say let's do embarrassing shit, I should be willing to kick it off.
If we're going to lay some ground rules here, no, nothing in your porn history.
No.
Okay.
Keep that shit locked down.
Yeah.
I love fucking Kesha. She's in my run mix. Especially the last album, Rainbow, like fucking cover to cover, it was great. And I know like that's not supposed to be the target market that I fit into, but the woman knows how to get like a fast, peppy beat that when you're working out, like fucking gets you moving. And then honestly, they just become earworms and you listen to them for fun, or I listen to them for fun. So I think that probably falls still within healthily the guilty pleasure area.
Yeah, I only know one song and I like it.
I just assumed that, your spirit animal was Kesha.
Not entirely wrong.
I'd got that vibe from you. That unapologetic party boy vibe.
Yeah, if you haven't checked out Rainbow and you do a lot of cardio, throw that on your iPhone or your whatever your MP3 player is, and you might find some favorites in there.
I'd say my guilty pleasure is in the same arena, not quite as specific, I fucking love disco. I will, I will get nice and hammered. And if they ain't playing Motown, I want something to dance to and something with a decent bass line. And I will get down for some disco.
I can see that. They don't. I mean, that is a very specific, but it is a dance-heavy beat.
Oh, I don't like modern dance music. I'm not particularly fond of a lot of 80s pop, but you give me a kind of late 70s, early 80s disco beat and a few beers, I will own that dance floor as only a middle-aged man can.
Well, that's something I'm adding to the playlist for A&D Con.
Remember that when we get to the next Desert Island Discs. Me, I think I mentioned on our chat, I watched it just last night for about the 1200th time, and I had to wait for my wife to leave because I tried to watch it the day before, and she was just like, "We're not going to watch this, are we?" But the movie Congo, it is not Michael Crichton's best book. It is by far not his best movie made from his books. But there is something so, and it is overall just not a good movie, but there is something so endearingly charming about it. I just love the fuck out of this movie.
It's got Bruce Campbell in it and Tim Curry. It's not a guilty pleasure, mate. It's a cultural fucking treasure.
Yeah, most people do not look at it that way.
Most people are wrong. Most people are heretics.
Yeah, it's
Tim Curry doing what he does best,
and Ernie Hudson.
Oh yeah.
It just, there's something about this movie that I'm watching it and like I'm inherently know it's not good, but I just love every single scene of this movie.
And Ernie Hudson is suave as fuck in that movie. He's I think everyone in it, barring the leading lady, who's a little bit vanilla, is really kind of hamming it up to their biggest B-movie performance. Yeah. And it's I love that movie. Yeah. I can't sit here and hear you call it a guilty pleasure. I just can't, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, the very end of it, like the whole part where she's just shooting killer apes with a laser, just
blowing up monkeys with lasers.
Just should make you want to roll your eyes out of your head. Yeah, it just puts a stupid smile on my face to watch that scene.
God, I watched this when I was about 16 with my mates, and for about 2 years, we'd just randomly say, in a weird foreign accent, "The legend of the killer ape is true." Just at random intervals whenever we were bored.
The scene where they come across, I guess, the natives, and they're chanting, trying to bring this like dead guy back to life. And I realize now that it's probably a good thing I didn't, because I would probably get the shit kicked out of me. But for the longest time, I wanted that to be my ringtone.
I think we have to at the movies that bad boy, to be honest.
That feels like a good contender.
Yeah, I'm not accepting that as a guilty pleasure. But let's move on. Let's put a pin in that.
Yeah, mine's certainly a guilty pleasure. I've mentioned it before, but I'm coming back to Revolutionary Girl Utena. That's I should be ashamed of myself. A grown man obsessed about this Japanese cartoon about some fucked up student council and dueling for a rose bride, but it blows my mind. It's one of the only not mine things on my shelf of honor.
You have a shelf of honor.
I'll throw above in my desk. I'll throw a quick photo here in the chat.
I was gonna say, from the sound of it, it's more like it's a shelf of Bevan that just so happens to have an anime thing on it.
Nice. The shelf of honor.
But yeah, there's not a whole lot of things I have a whole lot of respect for that aren't mine.
To be honest, anime as a whole is kind of coming out of the cold. It's really taken off. It's kind of nudging aside traditional American comics, which I've always preferred and grown up on. It's kind of nudging aside traditional American cartoons. It's already very much informed the style of Cal Art, which is in turn like very popular with American productions at the moment. And as somebody who used to grow up watching Valley of the Wind, back in the old days when these were kind of special things you had to look for or sometimes order in You know, I remember watching when I was about 12, getting Devilman and just thinking, this is the best thing ever. It's got cartoon tits, it's got cartoon violence. It doesn't make a lick of sense, but there's monsters killing each other, and some of those monsters have tits. You know, but then kind of getting into the more, well, the less tit and monster orientated stuff, and realizing that it has its own humor and its own unique, wonderful style is another thing that I would say is becoming less a guilty pleasure and more an appreciated art form. And I'm very glad of that.
Now, Uten is still guilty pleasure.
Yeah, I was about to add, but there's definitely a large subset of it that's definitely got to stay guilty for the sake of all our sanities.
I mean, I'll go back. I mean, it is a really good story, but only if you get past the first of 3 arcs. Because then you're still like, I'm morbidly curious as to what's coming, but this is still a show for little girls. That's a little bit fucked up.
I still have that weird kind of dissonance about it, where my daughter's really getting into it now, and she's like, I want to dress as this character. I have no idea. She'll sit down and talk. She'll explain a whole plot to these things, and they're fucking mental. It's like, oh yeah, there's the boy joins a literature club, and the girl likes him, but it turns out they're all in virtual reality, and she starts killing her rivals. I'm like, this is all. You just sound like you're mad. I'm going to take you to a doctor. And then she said, I want to dress up to this character as Halloween. I'm like, okay, I'll buy you a purple wig, and I'll buy you a Japanese schoolgirl costume. And I'm like, oh, this is the internet. That's harder than it sounds. And it's so it's always been pushed into the grimy fringes, and I think it's still kind of battling coming into the mainstream. But yeah, I'm glad it is.
Might be a topic for a future side quest. Dive all the way into.
Like a tentacle in a cartoon. You see how steep I have in guilt?
I feel like we have to end there or it's going to get way bad.
Oh, this has been an interesting side quest. It always is when we talk about what we're passionate about. We try to put solid framings around this for the sake of the listener, so you can pretend we had a constructive conversation. But all we're really doing is splurging out here, and I hope you, the listener, enjoyed splurging out with us as much as we enjoyed splurging out. Catch us next time for the next Authors and Dragons adventure, or the next side quest where we may play a game, or we may just talk a lot of shit again. Say goodbye, guys.
Goodbye.
Later.